Both the legislature and the executive branch to work very hard. Don't pat each other on the back. We really didn't fix anything other than raise a lot of money. Now we have to fix what I consider to be structurally broken, so we're not right back here a few years from now, and not wait to year 4, 5, and 6. And I'll tell you that one of the reasons we left it at 27 months the last time was to force the legislature to the table with the administration to fix it, and it didn't happen. So 7 years might give us some stability, but one part of me, or a large part of me, believes that this thing's going to go unchecked for the next 4 years, and we're really not going to fix anything. I think when you look at the budgets over the years, we're just finishing a fiscal year where we spent the most money in the history of the state, and only to finish second now to the new fiscal year. We'll spend more money this year, in the fiscal year we're in, than any other year in the history of our state. So I think we need to take a very hard look at that, and delve into some of the big issues and where we spent a lot of money, and see how do we structurally fix this thing. There was several bills filed in the session that I supported that would have reformed our pension system, at least the state pension system, and I give a lot of credit to Lasers for taking the lead. That would revamp and have no effect really on any current state employees unless they wanted to opt into the program. I thought that was a very good bill, and I really hope next year that they bring it back, because that has to get done. Our Medicaid program, I think everybody knows we have problems, and it needs some accountability. We have an unsustainable cost in health care. Health care is just sucking up our budget and will continue. And you can read just about everywhere the unpredictability of health care and where we're headed is going to be a problem in the future. And I tell people, one of my favorite sayings now, but it's the truth. I watch government, and I'm in my 11th year now. I've spent 10 years working on the budget issues, and the state tends to live by crisis, from crisis to crisis, and we don't do a whole lot of long-term planning for our future. Everybody sort of deals with today, and I think as a leader, we need to have discussions about not only what we do today and how we pay our bills today, but how we're going to pay our bills 20 years from now. So another year's passed, and I still believe government is growing out of control, and you can't afford it. As a businessman, coming through, especially since 2008, really since after Katrina, business in my world hasn't really been the same. We had a real big high right after Katrina, and then it's sort of been down, and now it's just been fluctuating up and down since, in the residential development business and real estate business where I earn my living. My wife runs our construction company now, and she's been doing that for about 4 years. But we have to make very difficult decisions every day, and we typically start with a number and budget behind that number. We as a government tend to spend and then go find the money to support that spending. It's really the opposite of what everybody does in their own personal lives. And I've said this many times, the only place this model works is in government, because it wouldn't work anyplace else. I talk a lot about the debt of the state as the treasurer and as your banker, basically. In the business world, when I go see my banker and I want to do project A, B, or C, the first thing he does is look at my debt and my spending habits before he determines whether or not I'm going to get a loan or not. And I would tell you, I'm going to strongly encourage both sides that we have to get our spending under control. It's not at a healthy level. When you look at how much we're spending this year compared to last, as I said earlier, we're going to spend more money this year than we did last year and then all the years previous. So I think that is one of the biggest issues facing our state. Moody's recently came out with a report that showed that our debt per person or per capita is around $1,600. It's $500 more than the states of Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, and Tennessee. So we're spending the money, we're just not getting enough of it in. And we've been fortunate, as I tell the rating agencies all the time, having to have a balanced budget. Come hook or crook, it's happened. Whether I agree with it or not, at the end of the day, our budgets have been balanced, which is required in the Constitution. I would tell you, and that debt is made up, that statistic is made up from our bonds that we borrow and our pension system and related benefits. And that's, again, that's not my report, that comes from Moody's. So where do we go from here? As I said earlier, I think we'll outgrow this cash pretty quick. The penny fell off and came back with 0.45. So we shouldn't get as much money from that sales tax, but we'll see what the economy does, if the economy makes up that difference. But we have a lot of work to do moving forward, which includes pension reform, tax reform, all the things I've mentioned, healthcare spending. One of my pet peeves is capital outlay. We're going to spend about $423 million this year on carrying costs and paying for projects that aren't all priorities to the state of Louisiana. When we're begging and borrowing to get big infrastructure needs taken care of, we're also spending money on things I believe have no business of the state of Louisiana paying for. I think one of the things that we have to improve on as well is increase our savings account, which is, in my opinion, dangerously low. One of the things that happened this past year, that probably one of the more aggravating things that I've seen happen in my 11 years in Baton Rouge, is we had a surplus, everybody knows, around $123 million. But what story never made it out was that not of that 99 million of it came from the rainy day fund. So at the end of the year, when we had the surplus, instead of putting it back in our savings account, we spent it. I say we, the legislature and the administration spent it, and I differ. I think they should have put the 99 million back in the rainy day, and they did put 31, but it was a net loss of $68 million. The Constitution requires, when you have a surplus, that a certain amount of it has to go to the rainy day. Problem is, it's like taking money from your savings account, putting your checking account, and thinking you had a windfall. And it's smoke and mirrors. So I wish we'd be a little bit more disciplined, a little more conservative on issues like that. So my goal as treasurer is basically to force state government to create better spending habits. Not live from crisis to crisis, and plan for the future. And I will push both the legislative and executive branches to the table to look at ways that we can better spend, get control of our debt. As I tell people, I'm conservative as a business person. My wife and I run our business conservatively, and I tell people all the time, I believe government needs to be more conservative. And I didn't say they needed to be more Republican or they needed to be more Democrat. They need to be more conservative. The dollar bill does not have a D or an R stamped on it. It all spends the same way. I learned in first grade that 1 + 1 is 2, and if you spent 2, you were broke. So that's my sort of simple approach to it. But we have to do better, and I think we will. One of the things that I heard both the governor talk about and the legislature talk about, actually was my last session as a member of the Appropriations Committee, when we submitted a budget that would be about 2% less than what Revenue Estimating Committee projected that we were going to have. And I think that's a very, very healthy and wise thing to do. The governor said back then that he liked the idea, but thought the timing was bad. We had this big cliff that we were facing. Well, the cliff is past us. Now it's time to start doing some things and start saving some money. You can use that money to build up the rainy day, pay down pension, use towards infrastructure projects, but we need to do it. If we don't do it now, we'll never do it. So I'm going to work hard on that issue as well. So that's about a wrap for me. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak. I don't know what took you 7 months to do it, but I'm happy I'm here to answer your questions. Yes, sir.
Would you give us some specific examples, please?
On?
Specific examples on reducing the expenses. I mean, you're talking about conservative, or that's fine. What does that mean in English?
Well, when I use the word conservative, it doesn't have a political. So he's asking for specific examples. I see this big yellow sign up here. What are some examples? Half our budget is spent on healthcare. Almost half our budget. So you really don't have much of a choice. You're either going to have to figure out how to ramp up and raise a lot more revenue down the line, because this is temporary. When government's growing between a 9 to 24%, and you're only growing at 1%, then you don't have any choice. Period. If you were in your own personal life or your own personal business, you wouldn't be able to just keep going more and more and more. So pick it. You're spending $30 billion. You're going to have to decide where.
Most of us are in the insurance business.
I'm not in insurance business. I don't understand that. I'm not in insurance business. I'm in business. I do real estate, and I can't spend more money and budget more than what I have.
Can we have some media questions?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Following up on the state health care
Yeah.
issue, a couple of years, I think 2020, we started having to pay a larger share of
Right.
the Medicaid portion. What do you believe the state should do to cover some of the losses they're going to be facing?
Well, look, 2020 is a long way off, believe it or not. I was reading an article, a national article the other day. Many of the states, nobody really knows what's going to happen tomorrow when it comes to the feds and what this whole health care plan is going to look like. I've always said this. We at least have to make sure that we're using every penny we have wisely and not wasting a dime. I don't believe we are. I don't think many people believe we are. So I think you have to start there. We've had audit after audit after audit. I think it was like 10 audits in a row. So I think first you have to clean up your act and make sure that we're not wasting any money. And then who knows what the feds, I can't predict what's going to happen with the feds. I did read a number that the first year could mean somewhere between $30 to $50 million in extra money to the state of Louisiana. That's a lot of money considering where we are right now. Yes, sir.
What role of the state treasurer is managing the state's portfolio?
Correct.
In your transition from the legislature to that role, what does our portfolio contain? What is everybody concerned about?
Yeah, so the question is about the portfolio and transitioning from a legislator to the treasurer and how we managing that. Fortunately, our portfolio right now is looking pretty good. We have over $1 billion more today in our funds than we did 2 years ago. So the thing about the state compared to the outside world, you can only invest those things in very, very secure type investments. I think what I've tried to do sort of outside the box, we have this thing called unclaimed property that most people have no idea what unclaimed property is, but it's lost money. This money belongs to the citizens of Louisiana. We had some legislation that I worked with several legislators on that would take the money that's not returned and create a trust fund. And you take the proceeds from that trust fund and you use it on capital outlay projects for locals. We did get that through the Senate and the House and had it vetoed. But we're already working to bring that back for next year. It's going to need a constitutional amendment to do it. But we have some flexibility there on how we're going to invest that. I'm going to ask the legislature to support us on that. But everything else is pretty much locked down on how we can invest. It has to be very conservative, municipal bonds and treasury bills and things like that. We don't go in an open market and invest into the markets with our money. The Constitution prevents us from doing that.
You don't know the breakout?
I'm sorry?
You don't know the breakout?
How much we have invested? Not off the top of my head. You know, the funds, I mean, we have about almost $7 billion compared, you know, when you add up our trust funds and the daily monies that we invest for the states, about $7 billion. And then we have a cash flow of about almost $40 billion. That money will sit in interest-bearing accounts on a daily basis. But those are the totals. How it's broken down each one, I don't know that. Yes, sir.
You referred to the retirement, the lasers and the retirement bill, I presume you meaning the peacock?
Yes, sir.
Bill
Yes, sir.
package. And do you, as treasurer, at one time, and again, I'm out of date in so many ways, as treasurer, do you still sit on retirement boards and have an active role in those?
Yeah, so my office, the treasurer by statute sits now on 30 boards, not counting different resolutions passed, putting us on task force or whatever. So obviously I can't sit on every board. My commitment, and one change I made is I took my investment team and I make my investment team go to every retirement board meeting, because the retirement boards are made up of people who are, you know, receiving the benefits. You know, if you take away the executive team and the people they hire, the treasurer's office has the only expertise, so to speak, professional people who do that every day. So I jockeyed some people around, because when you have to go to 30 board meetings every month, it's a big burden on your staff. But I've asked my investment team specifically to sit on every retirement board. And then I make 2 a year of every one. And I'm on track so far to do that. It's a lot of boards. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious, we've heard for several years now warnings about the state's bond ratings. We've been put on alert. I know Moody's just recently moved to stabilize, not necessarily upgrade, but
Right.
a better signal. I guess, can you speak a little bit more to what you're hearing from the ratings agencies, especially since the legislature hasn't done structural reform like they suggested?
Right, so the questions about what's my thoughts with the rating agencies, and I have spoken to all three recently. And in general, I think everything sounds positive. You know, at the end of the day, they want to basically know that we have the revenue to support our debt. And so passing the taxes or the sales tax, that was a step in the right direction. But they will very quickly tell you sales tax isn't necessarily a very stable means. You still haven't done anything structurally. You still don't have a very good savings account. So these are all things that we will have to work on. You know, we do need to do tax reform. Problem is, you can't get 53 people to agree. You know, I do tell people that, you know, there's a reason why you need a 2/3 vote to raise a tax in the legislature. You know, that's the law. You know, you don't want to be able to raise a tax with a majority vote. You have to have a super majority. And, you know, tax reform has just eluded the legislature. And look, I was part of that legislature. It's very difficult once you give something to take it back. You know, so when you ask what specific that you're going to do, we have to do tax reform. We can't afford not to do it. You know, we give away $7 billion in credits and rebates and exemptions every year. You know, I think every dime needs to be on the table. And I would tell you, as a former member of the House Appropriations Committee, I had a bill one year that would appropriate every dime in state government, which you do in your own world and you would do in your own business. Why wouldn't we do that in the state of Louisiana? What happens is some of these things get paid off the top first, which means it's a priority over education, healthcare, feeding the poor, whatever. You know, and I don't think that's prudent budgeting, especially when you're short on cash. If I think the governor should have the ability to micromanage the dollars, but we haven't gotten that passed. We've had bills over the last 10 years, and I get asked a lot about Constitutional Convention. We could fix this. This could get fixed without a Constitutional Convention, but you got to have some political will to do it, you know? And I used to not support that, and then I went to supporting it because we've tried the bills, we've tried to get it passed, and none of it has passed. So I supported the Constitutional Convention recently because of that. We've tried and struck out. So we have issues that need to be fixed, and at this point in the game, I don't care how we get there, we just need to get there. So I think the rating agencies see that, which is now why I used to say we've had the gun cocked and held to our heads. Now the hammer's not cocked anymore, but they're still holding the gun. There's still just as much work to do today as there was, 2 weeks ago when the session ended. Yes, sir.
Question, how much money do we get from the federal government versus how much we pay the federal government?
Yeah, our budget is around 30 billion, and I would say that it's probably right around 13, 14 billion we're getting from the feds, and growing. And it's really, our budget's the most this year than last, most we've ever had, mostly because the amount of money we're getting from the feds.
We get
It's grown.
13 back from the federal government. How much does Louisiana pay in terms of income tax?
Yeah, so the question is, do I know how much do the citizens of Louisiana pay in taxes to the feds? And I don't know that question. I would tell you this much, I'd probably take a guess and say we get back more than we pay. I mean, Louisiana's a very poor state. When 40+% of your population's on Medicaid, that's, they have givers and takers in the states, and just like we do in our parishes, but we probably, if I had a guess, we're taking more than we're giving. Yes, sir.
As far as a timeline, you made the metaphor of the gun still being pointed to us. Next year's an election year. Obviously, that'll be the next revenue session, so to speak. What kind of timeline do you see as far as lawmakers actually going through those structural reforms? And do you think the governor's race next year will impede those sort of negotiations?
Well, look, as an entrepreneur and somebody who, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Do I think the structural changes will be impeded or worked on with election year coming up? I would tell you, I'm going to talk about it every opportunity I get, because we need to do that. Elections or no elections. It's our biggest problem that we face that would bring some stability to where the legislature's not coming back constantly asking you for more taxes. I don't think we want to be the highest sales tax state in the nation, so we have to fix it. An election year, not. We need to deal with those issues. And the next session is a fiscal session. Yes, sir.
You just mentioned the highest sales tax rate, and you mentioned the fiscal cliff being resolved through the sales tax measure. As you know, there were 20 Republicans who voted against every single sales tax measure. There was also one Democrat, John Milkovich in the Senate. There were numerous social media campaigns put out by the Republican delegation promising voters that they would hold firm. Backlands Harris pretty much assured that the House would never pass anything above 0.33. And yet, toward the end, there was a complete collapse in that regard. And the governor, in all his admission, he smoked a cigar on the last day of legislative session. What would you say to those fiscal conservatives who would feel like they were let down, that their resolve in that regard was not adhered to, and that there was a complete collapse on the part of the willingness to hold the line?
Yeah, so the question is, what's my message to those that did hold the line during a regular session and didn't want to raise revenues? I tell you, if I was in a legislature today, or if I had taken that vote, I would have voted no. And let me tell you why. Just a couple years ago, we promised the citizens of Louisiana that we were going to raise our sales tax a penny, and in 27 months, we were going to have tax reform and structural reform of our budget. Neither happened. For the reasons, a lot of people can point fingers on why, but it didn't happen. That was the responsibility of the governor and the legislature, period. You know, some of this is, it's too easy to get out, which is why I pushed for 27 months. I didn't want it to be easy that you could get out of it. Now they're going to have 7 years to look at it. And you want to bet how long it's going to take them to do it? 6 years and 360 days. You know, I mean, that's the nature. That's how we are as human beings, and I understood that. So I could very easily tell you why I voted no. Now, I can't tell you why all these folks voted no, but I would have voted no simply for that reason. And I would tell them to hold the line, because as I often say, somebody's got to be the parent in the room and use one word, one simple word that you use as a new grandparent of fixing to be 6 months. We haven't had to use this word yet, but it's coming, and it's no. You have to say no. You can't say yes to everything. And the state is not going to get any richer by continuing to raise taxes without some structural reforms to go along with it. So that's my message to my former colleagues, and sort of following up on your question, I'd start next week. I'd take a little break the end of July and start in August and get everybody in a room, and you start pounding away, because that's what I used to do, and it takes that long. You just can't fix these structural problems in a day. It takes months and months and months of meetings to build a consensus.
If it turns out that through this measure, the fiscal year that we're about to enter ends up with, say, a $300-400 million surplus as a result of this, do you think there will be an incredible backlash about the inaccuracies of the projected fiscal cliff that was greatly exaggerated, and therefore a clamor to repeal a portion of this 0.45?
So do I believe there'll be a backlash? It really just depends on how the whole thing gets spun. Really depends how a lot of you talk about it. You know, some are going to say, well, we had this big economic boom, and I can't argue that's the truth. Truth is maybe not the right word. That may not be the most accurate way to describe it. Obviously the internet sales tax issue is going to be a big issue, depending on where you are from. I've heard recently New Norman on the radio talking about Jefferson Parish and how much tax they already collect on the internet from these big companies. But nobody really knows what that figure is. But I did read an article last week or 2 weeks ago that the Secretary Robinson said that they're gonna try to implement this by 2019. That's right around the corner. So I know we had some very specific issues that we were facing, especially when it comes to single source collections. And I'm curious to see how that happens, and then how much revenue we raise. Because here's the bottom line. We truly spend as a government every penny we have. Every penny we have, we spend, and then we spend everything we think we're going to have, which is why I strongly suggest that whatever the revenue estimated is, of that 100%, you only spend 98, and you sort of force a savings habit. I saw a bunch of hands. Hold on one second. Anybody else before I go back to the twos?
I had a question on unclaimed property.
Okay, hold on. I'll come to you. Unclaimed property.
Could you update us on the Ohio checkbook and tell us what came from all that?
Yeah, so Louisiana had a bill, I think it was Senator Ward and Barry Ivy, the speaker. There were several that worked on it, and it passed.
John?
Yes, sir.
Tell us what it.
Oh, I'm sorry. The asking about Ohio checkbook and what's Louisiana's version that passed the recent session. So it did pass. It was fought on several special sessions, and then it passed this last one. And I think that's great for Louisiana. I think the more transparent government is, at every level. And this just isn't the state. And if you go do a little research, several parishes are getting on the bandwagon. And I know Lafayette, their school board, their parish government, and St. Tammany, where I reside, is talking about doing a similar type website where you can go on and see how your money is spent. And I think that's important because, look, you have to have confidence. The public has to have confidence in its public leaders on how they're spending money, and I think it's a great way to build confidence. Unclaimed property question.
How easy is it to go on your website and find, I punch in my name if I have any money coming?
So the question is unclaimed property, and how do you find it? So it's unclaimed property is like one of my favorite things. You know, we this past fiscal year we returned $5 million more than we did the previous year, and we're going to work very, very hard to continue that. You can search very easily. Just go to latreasury.com, click on unclaimed property, and you can punch your name in. You can punch in your family's name, your friends' names. You can literally do it for hours. It's like an Easter egg hunt. But there's a lot of money. You know, one of the things, and I spoke about this earlier, that I pushed some legislation to create this trust fund from the unclaimed property money that's not getting claimed. This is lagniappe dollars, in my opinion. And when you just don't get very many opportunities to take money like that and create something good with it. Most people, I didn't know, and not anybody I've talked to since, knew that whatever doesn't get spent annually, guess what happens to it? If it doesn't get returned, it goes into the general fund. And they keep a ledger, and it's red, okay? The state owes the Unclaimed Property Division $858 million, because that's what we've spent. So we're going to work real hard to create better outcomes, but then I believe instead of spending it in the general fund, let's eventually put it into a trust fund. We ran a model that in 25 years from now would have about $1.3 billion and be kicking off somewhere between $30 to $35 million a year. Now that's some long range planning, but it's the type of things that we need to do to make Louisiana economically and more sustainable from a cash standpoint. And then what you could do, as I said earlier, you're not a big capital outlay. I'm not a big capital outlay fan. I think it's a very broken system, and it's a pay to play or play to pay, however you want to say it. But this would be a loan, a low interest loan that municipalities could come in and borrow money for their particular projects, do their project, pay it back, and pay less than 1%, and it would just keep replenishing the fund. There are two funds like it in Louisiana, but I think this would be a great idea, and it'd be a conservative thing to do with your money. I saw one hand in the back. Yes, sir.
State Treasurer, do you have any input into incentive packages that are offered to industry come to Louisiana?
Yes, the question is, do I have any input on incentive packages for companies coming to Louisiana? If they ask me, but they don't call, the economic development director doesn't call me and ask me. I think the best thing that I can do for you as a citizens of this state, and for businesses in this state, and for people who want to come to Louisiana and do business, is get our spending under control and just keep pounding it, just like you would do in your own world. I see that as a major role that I can play. So that would make it more encouraging from outsiders, knowing that Louisiana, when you pick up these lists and you look at it, when you look at the metrics on debt, that we're not ranked 16th in the nation in debt. That's what we have to improve. Hold on. Yes, sir.
Can you comment
there various state or parish or sheriff districts that collect taxes. Can you comment on that and the inefficiencies there versus board of contact collecting the taxes?
So the question is about the way we collect taxes and sales taxes across the state, and you know, that's been a big discussion over the years. We're one of the only states in the nation that collect sales tax and local tax the way we do. They call it a single source collection. The feds require that you have a single source collection in order to collect internet sales tax. I don't know what the Secretary's plan is to do that, and I'm certainly no expert in it, but I have said this before, I think you got a better shot at seeing Santa Claus. You know, these parishes have created a lot of infrastructure to collect sales tax. A lot of jobs, a lot of salaries, it's a lot of people. You know, there's no incentive to get rid of it. So again, it's one of those things that are very difficult, and the governor has some very difficult decisions to lead on, and that's one of them. Yes, sir.
And actually, just bouncing off that sales tax comment, new reports out, we mentioned Louisiana being the highest combined average. Some reports saying we're now the second highest in the country. Does that matter to you?
On sales tax?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question is, does it matter to me whether we're highest in the country, or second to highest, or fifth to highest? Yeah, it does. You talk about bringing business to Louisiana. Who wants to bring a retail business to Louisiana knowing that you got to pay the highest combined sales tax in the country? You know, that's just not good. You know, it's not good PR. You know, so that needs to change.
And for one more quick question, if somebody has it, preferably from the media. Okay, John, you collect the money. We were kind of like our
The last question of the day comes from the treasurer to the treasurer.
I was wondering, back on unclaimed property, you came up with the idea of the trust fund. What did other states do? Because they must have the same situation.
Yeah, so most states, and I don't remember all the statistics, but the law says, so the question is what other states do with the money from unclaimed property. Most states you have to, I say most, you have some that take it and spend it like we are, but then you have some that's in statute that it forever belongs to you, whether it's one day or 40 years. Somebody in your family or your heirs can claim it. And we just had an heir claim some money in Northwest Louisiana. One claim was $2.3 million. Her father had passed away, and they had lost track of the company had lost the address, and it came to the state. So I don't know if any states do what I'm proposing. That's why it's such a great idea.